The biblical text says that it is the time of prayer. 3 in the afternoon. Peter and John are also just arriving at the beautiful gate. There's a man who we are told has been paralyzed from birth, unable to walk. He's not introduced by name. All we know is that each day a family member or friend would carry him to the beautiful gate. Those who have lost the ability to stand on their own feet have a choice to make. They can become angry and violent, at times ending up in prison, or they become docile and servile, submitting to the circumstances. I wonder, has his misery become a source of income for everyone else in the family? Is he the one feeding the friends that carry him there every day? The place has clearly been chosen carefully. Right here at the entrance to the temple, people might be more open to show mercy and practice solidarity. For how can anyone come to pray and hope to be heard by God without first having lent one's ear to those in need? But then we hear from Peter that they themselves do not have any silver or gold to give. And this could have been the end of their encounter. But then the story continues. For what they end up giving is so much more than what money can give. Our text captures the turning point beautifully. It first says, Peter looked straight at him, as did John. Then Peter said, "Look at us." I like the snapshot from a Jesus movie. The filmmaker encourages us to interpret Peter's instructing, "Look at us," not as a commanding and insulting, "Look at me." It is also not the "look at me" of a grand entrance for someone who is about to do a mighty miracle. Notice how Peter is already on his knees when he speaks to the man. He's seeking eye contact by coming down to the man's level. But notice also that the text then says, so the man gave them his attention. There's a sudden reversal of roles and expectations. It is no longer the poor man seeking attention from those passing by. Now it is the one passing by who has to seek the beggar's attention. This reversal of roles speaks volumes. It tells us something about the poor man's despondency. Yes, he's begging, but really no longer expecting something. But it also shows us how the man struggles to make eye contact with Peter. Is he too embarrassed or ashamed of himself, or just not used to such human and humane contact? Or is it too painful to look at Peter because it forces him to look at himself, to face up to how much he has internalized society's rejection? What makes this moment and the gate so beautiful is that the sudden human connection between Peter, John, and the man come about because Peter and John have nothing to give than themselves. And this is the poor man's great fortune. For if Peter and John would have been able to give some money, all they would have been able to do is to alleviate and soften some of his material needs. Nothing would have really changed for the man. But now that John and Peter have nothing to give than themselves, the drama of new life begins to unfold. It is a moment of resurrection, not born of material abundance, but rather inspired by an experience of scarcity and the unexpected gift of human connection. We have so much more to give than we think. In giving themselves, Peter and John are able to move beyond a once-off act of charity. Their giving culminates in a little resurrection. We hear Peter say to the man, "Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, get up and walk." Then Peter takes the man's right hand, helps him up, and Luke tells us that instantly the man's feet and ankles became strong. What happened? Now one can of course interpret the scene as an example of a supernatural miracle. Peter, gifted with the Spirit, is able to heal miraculously. End of story. But where does this leave us? Us who do not seem to be gifted with such powers. We become spectators, admirers from afar, and the story becomes removed from our own reality, turned into another legend about our great saints. There are, of course, those modern-day evangelists who would say that if only we would have enough faith, those miracles would still be possible. Very often, though, they blame the sick and their lack of faith for not having been healed. In that way, the sick are victimized the second time, now made to feel guilty about their lack of trust in God. Meanwhile, in our story, the paralyzed man is not asked to believe. I do believe in healing, and I do believe in little resurrections. But my interpretation of the healing stories is no longer limited to some supernatural intervention from above. If God is God, of course, everything is possible. That is not in doubt. But there is enough in the story, in the details of the encounter, to point us beyond a literal understanding, to a more symbolic reading of the healing story, which is further informed also by modern-day sociological and psychological insights. Such a reading, in my mind, does not make the miracle smaller, but rather greater and more beautiful. And it allows the story to make me more trusting and hopeful that I too can become a channel of God's grace and mercy. What is so fascinating about this encounter? The man asks for money, but Peter cannot offer him any money. Instead, he offers him even more, the possibility of a new life. But it always begins with eye contact, with the experience of being truly seen and noticed. Look at me. In the name of Jesus of Nazareth, get up and walk. No, Peter is not using Jesus' name as a kind of secret formula in an attempt to evoke magical powers. Later on, he makes it very clear to his audience that he himself has no such power to heal. Any good counselor would acknowledge that her or his role is simply one of being a catalyst, providing a safe space for honest exploration, for growing understanding and acceptance of oneself, and for a renewed trust and confidence. Our wounded body can be the result of our wounded spirit, just as our wounded spirit can be the result of our wounded body. Our biblical healing stories remind us that it always takes at least two for healing powers to emerge from deep within. And how powerful the healing can be when it is able to source itself in the profound experience of a God who deeply loves us and cares for us. When Peter says, "Get up and walk," it is not the kind of abrupt and unsympathetic instruction sometimes given to people who are told to get their acts together and finally do something about their lives. Such an approach often just does the opposite. It creates even more anxieties and also certain defensiveness. The invitation to get up and walk is to remind us that every journey begins with a first step, where we learn to trust again our body, our heart, our feelings, our dreams and hopes, where we learn to trust again the God of life who is not against us but for us. To proclaim healing in the name of Jesus of Nazareth is to be a bold witness to such a love, and to allow such love to flow through us in a way that we ourselves become Christ to others. This is why one cannot read the Acts of the Apostles without keeping the Gospel of Luke as a blueprint in mind. The story of Jesus continues. Resurrection is not finished until everyone is raised to new life. The ministry of Jesus continues, is carried forward by people like Peter and John, by people like you and me. To minister to people in the name of Jesus is to hold them in love until there is no more room for fear, self-doubt, and self-rejection. Some will experience that their feet and ankles begin to become strong again. Others will gain the strength of spirit to live with dignity and hope despite their feet and ankles not becoming strong again. Some will jump up and start dancing into the temple. Others will ask to be carried, not just to the steps outside of the temple, but right into the temple, together with everyone else.